From the All Indiana Podcast Network, it's the Canine Lowe-Down, helping you get wise to the whys behind your dog's behavior.
That's a good boy.
With the Indie Dog Whisperer, Nathan Lowe.
Hi there, I'm Nathan Lowe, the Indie Dog Whisperer, and you're listening to the Canine Lowe-Down. Thanks so much for joining me today. On the evening of November 13, 2019, Fishers Police Canine Harlej was shot and killed by a suspect he was attempting to apprehend. Today on the Canine Lowe-Down, I sit down with Harlej's handler and law enforcement partner, Fishers Police Officer Jarred Koopman, as he recounts how he grieved, healed, and moved forward with life after the loss of his beloved canine partner. This is the Canine Lowe-Down.
Weight loss. It needs to be fast and sustainable. Noom GLP-1 starts at just $149 and ships to your door in 7 days. Take it from Lauren, who lost 22 pounds on Noom.
If I come off of the GLP-1, it's not going to automatically make my weight yo-yo back.
$149 GLP-1s? Now that's Noom smart. Get started at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. Individual results may vary. Not all customers will medically qualify for prescription medications. Compounded medications are not reviewed by the FDA for safety, efficacy, or quality.
Hi, Jarred.
Hey,
thanks for being here. Good. How are you doing? I really
Good.
appreciate you sitting down to chat with me. I think as I was thinking about this, I think the reason it came to mind to have you is because I have so many clients that they lose a dog and they just can't get themselves to come around to get another one. And I knew you had lost Harlej, not just lost him like age, but tragic circumstances, and then got another dog and developed a relationship and are happy, but that's a process. So I wanted to talk to you about that because I think it will help people who really struggle with that process. Feel like I can never get another dog again.
Right.
You need to probably.
Yeah.
There's dogs that need you and you need a dog. Let's start. Let's back way up. Did you always want to be a canine officer? Did you always want? Are you like most boys in America? You're in my age group that is like. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm 40. You're 36. Sorry for the insult. Did you always want to be a police officer? Did you think about that as a kid or?
You know, I think every child, I feel like you just kind of drawn to like a police officer, right? Like seeing like them drive fast and the lights and all that stuff. So, growing up, I think I wanted to be a police officer. And then my dad was in pharmaceutical sales and I saw him like just go to like lunches and I'm like, well, I'll just do that. Like that seems way easier, right? But yeah, I went to, and I grew up with German Shepherds.
Okay.
So I obviously, I had kind of like the police look, if you will, having a dog, and he was such a good dog and a good family pet. And I went to college, and out of college, I was like, well, I'll just go into sales. So I actually went into HR first, and then went into sales, and then trying to maybe follow along in my dad's footsteps. And then through that process, I was like working out at the gym, and I met police officers, and they're like, hey, have you ever thought about being a police officer? And I was like, not really. And they're like, well, why don't you come do a ride-along? So that's how I kind of started. Yeah, I did some ride-alongs, and I was like, wow, you get paid for this? This is pretty cool. But yeah, I remember sitting down with Fishers when I was in their process, and one of the interview things you had to do was put or write out where you saw yourself in 5 years. And I put in there that I would be a canine handler.
Did you decide that like just seeing the form, or had you thought about that already?
No, there was something about, seeing police canines, and I don't remember a specific interaction or whatever that I had, but I think probably just growing up and just being a dog lover and having the German Shepherd, and it was just like that one extra thing in law enforcement that I was like, man, it'd be cool to have a police dog with me while I was working.
So you'd considered it, but when it came time to commit, you're like, yeah, I want to do this for sure.
Yeah, when I was in that, and also at the same time, you're sitting there and you're like, it was like a task obviously is like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Yes. And I'm like, I don't know. I just was step one was like just to get hired on, right? And then I'm like, well, I don't know. Like I think that's something that I've always been interested in. So I'm like, yeah, I would love to have a police canine as part of that process. So
the thing, what occurs to me too is like, especially now with a lot of solo cars where guys are riding by themselves, there's an advantage to having a canine partner with you as a backup. I mean, I think they used to ride a lot of 2 cars in LA back in the 80s and that. Now it's you're by yourself. Do you think there is a distinct advantage to having that canine with you?
I do. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like I always say that if police dogs could talk and write, they would take the place of human beings because of how intelligent they are, right?
Wow. Yeah.
But yeah, it's to know that you're showing up on any call, right? You never know exactly what's going to happen.
Yes.
And to know that your backup is right there is such an advantage. And plus, too, the dogs just being there, the presence of a dog alone or a dog barking. It's just that it's like almost like racking a shotgun. When you hear a shotgun, everybody can associate, right? And when you hear a dog bark, and then the cultural thing of a police dog barking and a well-trained police dog, it immediately gets people's attention, and it lets people know right away that, hey, when you're on scene, you have control, because they're like, please do not let that dog out.
Yes. And do you see that for some people where just police presence isn't having enough of an effect, the police dog has the desired effect?
100%.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So just the presence of that animal. And I was around Rico a little bit today. We just did the Lifestyle Live program. And just looking at his body language and the amount of, it's almost like he's a bow drawn back.
Yes.
And he's ready to shoot. I mean, his whole body was ready to spring wherever it needed to go. And you can see it in the face.
Right.
I think that's what with Malinois, and we'll talk about that. Actually, we can talk about that next. But that breed especially, unless you've seen one, you don't know what it looks like for a dog to really be ready to go.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you see like the videos on like social media where, I always say, if you see a social media video of a police canine running and taking out a decoy, we call it like the people that are essentially taking the bites for training, if you will. When you see those are Malinois. They're high drive. You can move them around easy. You can throw them up in windows. They're just such a versatile thing in police departments that they're nothing like it.
You think they're there to stay?
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh yeah. There's no other breed that I could see that, I mean, and the history of police canines, they've tried other breeds in the Malinois because they are so level-headed and they have such high drives, where you get other breeds where if you give them a correction and they don't feel like they deserve the correction, where then they come at the handler, right? Where Malinois, they are very loyal, but they're high drive, and that's all they want to do is just give me a task to do, and I'll do it.
That's I did not know that about the breed. That's really interesting about the redirection of aggression from other breeds, and the Malinois not being as inclined to that. That's really, really fascinating. We'll get back to the breed thing, but do you remember when you first met Harlej for the first time?
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it was so we had some basically our police department with where I am with the Fishers Police Department. We do a lot of community engagements with our police canines. So one of the big things that they really looked for was a social police dog. So when I got selected, I actually got paired up with another canine first.
And do you mind, how long after you joined the police force did they select you for canine duty?
I got hired in 2011.
Okay.
And then I became a handler in 2015.
Gotcha.
So I had worked the road, obviously, independently for a while, and kind of got a grasp of being a police officer. And then I went through the process of being selected as the next canine handler and was selected. And then from that point, once you're selected, then you go through, we go through a vendor in Northern Indiana.
Okay.
And then you kind of get paired up with your canine that way. But I was paired up with a dog and actually was like, yep, this is the dog that I'm going to have.
In training.
Okay. Yep. And we actually, for a whole week, I was with this dog. But I remember seeing there was 26 students, I think, in my class.
Okay. Different agencies?
Different agencies from all over the country. Okay. And I remember Harlej was there, and Harlej kind of got a bad rap, if you will, because essentially what they do is they show the dog and you get to see the dog work, like do narcotics, do bite work, and you can kind of see their temperament. Well, Harlej was biting the decoy and stuck all four paws on the decoy, literally jumped on the decoy, and people were like, this dog is crazy. And so my police department was concerned. They're like, this is not a first-time handler dog.
Oh.
And my first dog that I was paired with started struggling in class.
In what way?
They kind of categorize it as too green, meaning like when you become a handler and you get selected, they already have the drug work already built into that dog.
Yes.
So then what happened was that dog started kind of struggling. They felt like the dog took a step backwards where he started walking drug hides where a dog, when they're trained, they're a passive alert dog. So they'll go over to the drug hide that they are trained to alert to and sit down or lay down or whatever. And the dog that I was paired with would smell it, would show interest, and leave it. And so they started like trying to work a little bit, like just give him some more reps. And then they essentially came to me and said, hey, if you don't pick another police canine, you're going to have to go through the next class because I don't think this dog's going to work out.
Wow.
And I remember the trainer of the class said, hey, there's a dog in the back of the car. Go grab him so you can at least work reps. And then my department was kind of trying to figure out, hey, what's the best dog for Jarred?
Yes.
And I grabbed the dog and it was Harlej. And my immediate reaction was like, this dog's crazy.
What did he do? So you opened the door and see him. Had you seen him earlier in the week?
No one. Basically, it was meant to be because everybody passed up on this dog. 26 students passed up on Harlej because they saw the dog that was very ball possessive and on the decoy, where people were like, that is going to be a lot of work to put into that dog. So everyone passed up on him, and then I got paired with him because my dog essentially was fizzing out.
And it's amazing to think of that the dog everybody passed on would probably save the lives of multiple people later.
Yes.
What an amazing story. So you open that door and you come face to face with Harlej for the first time. What's he doing? What's going through your head when you see him?
First thing he wants to do, he wants to go work. I open that door, right? And you're like, they tell you like, hey, the dog just wants out. The dog wants to go be put to work.
Give me something to do.
Yes. Yep. So I remember grabbing him and like him just full tilt ahead and just very driven. And I started putting a ritual with the dog of taking his tennis ball, because that was the other thing. He was so possessive of the tennis ball. Yes. It would take time to get the tennis ball. So what would happen is, like, your early on stages, if the dog smelled the odor of narcotics, he would sit and indicate, and then you'd reward him with the tennis ball.
Right.
Well, then it would take a process to get the tennis ball back. So it took longer for my training.
Yeah.
But also I was working 2 dogs at the same time. So I felt like it helped me with my process because I was working 2 dogs where everyone else was working 1 dog. So I was doing double the reps that everyone else was doing.
Amazing.
And then the other thing that we did was the vendor allowed us to we wanted to do an in-house training of the dog, because once again, they still were like, hey, we're not sold that you as a new handler can handle this dog.
Yes.
And so we brought Harlej back to the city of Fishers, and we did some internal stuff with some other handlers that have been around dogs and whatever. And he calmed down. It was like just getting out of that environment of the kennel. And people were like, this dog's good. He just had to mellow out.
Overstimulated. And
it was almost like, in that alpha world of proving yourself.
Yes.
And you just saw almost like
a sigh of relief.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the dog, and I remember doing this one, we do a stalking drill to see if the dog kind of keys up on somebody that's not wearing a suit. And so we would do this drill. And what should happen is the dog will be calm. And then as the decoy gets closer, and once again, they're not wearing equipment, as the decoy gets closer, you're going to see a dog naturally start taking a protection of the stance and kind of stick their chest out, because now you're getting now into my territory.
Yes.
And then me as a brand new handler, I had to go get the dog after they stimulated this dog up, and I'm like, I'm about to get bit right here.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Was this your first, this training class and Harlej, was this your first intro to Malinois?
Yes.
Right in the deep end?
Yes. Yep. So I was like, well, I should say this. I decoyed for 2 years with the department.
Oh, you did? So you were the one getting chased down a bit.
So I was the one wearing the bite suits. Yeah. So I guess that was, I knew what they were capable of. But it's way different when you're selecting a dog of your own.
Wow.
So I just saw the drive and intensity that they have.
Yes.
So
Harlej went home with you then, correct?
Once I selected him, I started bringing him home. That way we could bond.
Did he live in your home with your family?
We have a strict policy at our agency, and they live outside.
Outside.
Yes.
So how important was it for Harlej to live his life under your boundaries, rules, and expectations? How important was that? I think
a dog just wants guidance, right? They just
Agreed.
They just want somebody. They're pack animals,
right.
And they want an alpha, because they are out. That's the thing about working dogs, is they're all alphas. So they all think they're the king.
High drive,
yes.
high dominance.
Yes.
Yeah, need leadership that's more dominant.
Correct. And once Harlej got that structure and found that structure, he became amazing. Amazing. He was an amazing dog to work.
But that's the key, is you could actually provide that for him. So many clients that I deal with, when I go in, I see this powerful dog, and I see a client that really doesn't have it in their heart to bring what needs to be brought to lead this dog. They don't have it, and they don't want to have it.
Right.
That's not a good fit for you then.
No.
And that brings me to this. A Malinois, understatement of the year, a Malinois isn't for everybody. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. Obviously, my experience with Malinois is from a working standpoint, but I've also seen Malinois as pets. And they are high drive. They have oral fixations, meaning that when they get anxious or frustrated, they want to put something in their mouth, almost like a pacifier. So we joke around as handlers to say, if you have a Malinois as a pet, you're going to come home to drywall ripped off your wall, because they'll find, and honestly, like I've had it too. Like obviously while we're working, the kennel doors closed, but they'll stick their mouth through the smallest of, and like Harlej ripped the back of my headrest.
Did he really?
Just out of, anxiousness on a call. If somebody was yelling, he could, obviously sense some of that of like, hey, I might be utilized on this call. And so he would find something to do because he just had to get that anxiety and frustration and drive out somehow. So they find something to do.
And this is a breed that, and by the way, my friend Patty Spittler, who's a news icon here in Indianapolis, always says, know your breed. Yeah. And it's especially important with Malinois. This is not a dog that's just going to lounge around on your floor and say, hey, what's up? Let's watch TV on a Saturday.
Correct. No.
And so if you want a dog that you're going to have to lead and give something to do a lot of the time, you may consider a Malinois, but otherwise, if you want a family pet, probably not.
No.
Not the choice.
No. Yeah, it's not. They are a fantastic dog. But like I said, they don't live in the house. And people, that's one question that we always get, like, oh, how are they in the house? Like, he would destroy a house if he was inside of house. But fantastic working dogs. I would not recommend them for a pet.
I 100% agree with you. So, in fact, Patty just interviewed Channing Tatum for his dog. They had a Malinois in the movie he was in called Dog, I think is what it was called. And he talked about this breed thing, about knowing, like just he said, being around these dogs. Yes. It's a different kind of thing.
Was that military movie?
I don't think so.
Because there's another famous one like Max
I'm sorry,
or something.
Watch your whole review. Yeah, no, this one was a Malinois, and Tatum was in this movie with a Malinois, and so Patty got to talk to him about the breed and knowing the breed and all that stuff. What, as far as bonding with Harlej, was that a quick process for you? Was it pretty seamless integration? Was it a little rough in spots? How did you find that? How did that go?
Well, going on my second dog now, I always say the benefit I had with Harlej is that he and I were both going through a process together. I had never been a handler, and he was just a young Malinois that needed guidance and direction, and we were learning together, right? Our journey was together. So I only knew what I knew. So like for me, it just felt like there was times of frustration, and then you talk with other handlers that have experience, and like that's just part of the process, right? But I think what helped me be successful right away and early on was just the obedience that I had, that I immediately instilled in the dog, and the consistency I had in our training.
Yes.
And that kind of, once again, we talked about this kind of off air, is just putting that boundaries on a dog allows that dog to have freedom within those boundaries, and they are looking for guidance and boundaries. That's
right. That leadership component is so critical for a dog, for them to relax.
Right.
It's kind of counterintuitive for people, because dogs as apex predators and as these pack animals, if they don't have strong leadership, especially a Malinois breed, there is no respect for you. There is no attentiveness to you, and they're just looking. Either they become the leader or they recognize it elsewhere.
Yes,
but they're not going to go without it.
Yes,
and
they'll find it somewhere.
Absolutely,
so you can be the person to do it, or they'll go find it somewhere.
Exactly,
else.
That's exactly right. So, and it's so important. Did he bond with your family? How did the process go with he and your family? Did he come to bond with them? Was that a little more? It was you and him. Were the pack mates? Were they kind of incorporated from? What did you see?
Well, early on, and from the day one of you getting a working dog, I mean, it's all about liability because of what the dog are capable of doing and what you're training the dog to be.
Yes.
So my family kind of removed himself from any interaction with him, and then once I got comfortable with him, then I started integrating I have two boys and my wife. I started allowing them, and honestly, at home he got to be a dog. There was no work being done in terms of any drug work or bite work or anything like that.
You didn't do any practice stuff at home.
You
left that's just his time to rest.
Correct. So at home, he just associated home as that's where I eat, that's where I sleep, that's where I rest.
Decompress.
Yes. Yeah. And that's where I could chew on my toy, and that's where the boys would, they would be able to pet him. But it was very strict in the fact of if my wife never fed him, and she never feeds Rico now. So it was, I am his handler, and gotcha. You are, if he's out, I'm out.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So that it's very important not to confuse him with work at home.
Correct.
Would you say?
Yes.
And I imagine too, the dog belongs to the agency, correct? To
yes.
Fisher Police Department. So if something were to happen to one of your family, the agency kind of bears the liability. So through you.
Yes.
So that is a really interesting chemistry to have to maintain.
Yeah. At the end, and that's what's the kind of the interesting thing of it all is. It is my dog. I'm caring for it. But at the end of the day, the meat and potatoes of it, that is a city dog.
Yes.
That is not my dog.
Yes, that's right. That makes sense. I think that's something people don't think about.
Yep.
It's like, oh, this is your dog in a way, but in a way not.
I'm the manager of this dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm the chosen leader for the city dog.
Yes. Yeah. And they instill me to be on my best behavior.
And I have leadership, a human above me.
Yeah.
So what was Harlej to you? I think people, even I remember when I was a kid, I saw, police officer with their dog, and it's like, well, the dog works for him, but then when they're home, it's just like, it's a pet. But there's so much more than a pet and just a pet that works with you. How would you describe what Harlej was to you as far as a pet, a partner, backup officer, a family member? What are some of the things words you would use to describe him to you personally? What Harlej was?
It's hard to put into words what he means. But it's that backup officer. My wife wrote, and I'll probably get emotional with it, but my wife during his funeral wrote that she felt safe for me going to work knowing that there was a dog in the back of the car.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
That was very instinctual. That would list that just had to be so on, right? Those dogs are always on point.
Yes.
That they are sensing the fear before I even sense fear.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So it means so like my wife said, like if it wasn't for Harlej, we might not have my husband or father.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's, you don't think about that aspect of it, but in a way, he was your guardian in a way, and she knew that.
Yeah,
he's watching out for my husband.
Yes, and then once again, amazing. It's like one of those things that you go to work as police officers. You go to work, you don't ever really think fully what you put your family through.
That's right.
Right. Like I know I'm going into situations, and whether training and everything, I feel good. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, everything to a spouse or family or your kids is all an unknown whenever you go to work, right. And they don't get to know stuff until after the fact, right. Whether that be, God forbid, somebody else is coming to the house saying something happened to your husband or wife or whatever it may be. And I remember that night, calling Kim, my wife, and right away I said, I'm fine, but Harlej's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you take us through that evening? Do you remember when the call first came in?
Yeah. I mean, roughly, it was kind of right before. It was right before midnight, or maybe right around midnight.
And what was the call?
We got called for a possible drunk driver.
Were you backup officer on this?
No. So we were, as our shift, we were all on a detail out east of Fishers on Oleo Road. So once again, everything kind of works out for a reason. We were all out there. Dispatch put out that there's a possible drunk driver heading northbound on 69. And we assume, like, they're heading on 69, they're probably going to go up into Madison County. Mm-hmm. And I think a supervisor got on the radio and said, just patch it along to Madison County. We're not going to be able to catch up to it. Mm-hmm. Well, we had an officer that was in FTO, which is our field training program, and he was with his trainer, and they see the vehicle on 69 that was pulled over on the side of the road. And they're like, hey, that's the vehicle matching description. So they just checked on the vehicle. And as they got behind the vehicle took off. And once again, we did not know it at the time who was in that vehicle, as we thought it was just a possible drunk driver. But I heard on the radio of the sirens going, and then them keying up on the radio saying the vehicle's taking off. We're northbound on 69. We're coming up to the 210, which is that exit, like the last exit into Fishers before you get into Madison County. And so we all assume, like, all right, there's no way they're coming into Fishers. Right. And they said, yep, they're getting off of the 210. And then like I said, I was 2 minutes from there. I broke away because of my role as a canine handler. I was like, okay, well, there's a pursuit. I need to go assist with that. That's kind of like my duty as a handler. And they got off on the 210 exit and headed toward Oleo Road. And our supervisor authorized a pit maneuver. And so we did a pit on that vehicle pretty quick. The vehicle crashed, and then kind of the back end of the vehicle was in the woods. Like there was like a big wooded area. And people that are local to Fishers or know that area, there's a community health building. And it's just south of Culver's on Oleo and Southeastern Parkway. And that vehicle backed in there, and as a handler, all the stuff, all your training immediately comes to you and start thinking of everything.
Did you observe the pit?
Yes.
Oh, so you were there.
I was the second car.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So there's a beautiful video out that Ron Shelnut did with Indianapolis, and he did a tribute video, and our beginning of that radio traffic is on that.
Okay.
And it's an amazing video.
Where
that
can
he
people
did.
listen?
You can find it on YouTube if you just search Canine Harlej, whatever, or go to Ron Shelnut's page.
Okay.
But to break away from that real quick, so Ron Shelnut works for Indianapolis, and he used to be a canine handler. And he is known he does amazing drone work and videographer work for funerals for police officers that are killed in line of duty.
Wow.
And when Harlej was killed, with him having the experience of being a handler himself, he's like, I want to do a little different spin to this, because he would just do video of kind of the process of the procession, and then the funeral. And so he did the radio traffic. He showed the woods where Harlej ended up being killed in. So yeah, going back to the pursuit, I'm by my vehicle. I'm waiting. We're essentially set up to do a felony stop.
And the suspect's fled by this point.
No.
Oh, he is not. He's still in the vehicle.
Yep. And when the vehicle initially passed me, I was actually, so I observed both occupants in the vehicle. And then I did a U-turn and got second in the pursuit. Okay. With having a K9, it's kind of in our supervisor, who's a lieutenant at the time, but was a sergeant. He was the one that conducted the pit maneuver. And I saw the occupants of the vehicle. They kind of waited a little bit. So we were thinking that maybe this would just be a felony stop. Well, then I see the driver climb out of the driver's side window and take off running eastbound into the woods. And then at that moment, that's when I reached back, grabbed Harlej, hooked him up on his collar, and then we took off running in the woods after him. And then the FTO that initially saw that vehicle, they were also with me during that track.
So you had him on leash at that point?
Correct.
Okay, so you're running after this guy. Could you still see the suspect running, or did he run out of sight?
He ran out of sight because it was pretty thick. Okay. It was like kind of like tall grass. There's some trees. And I had the advantage of lucky enough, we had trained in that area before so I knew and it was dark, and at the time it was, we'll never forget it. It was super cold that night. So using our flashlight, there was some snow on the ground. There was a full moon. And so almost using a flashlight was a disadvantage to us, because it almost crystallized where you couldn't really see anything. So I remember the direction that he went. And then once we broke the threshold of the car, because my main concern is if Harlej didn't have target lock, meaning if he doesn't see this, he knows right through my emotions and people yelling that he wants to go work. He just doesn't know exactly what he's supposed to do, right? So
he doesn't know who.
Yes, exactly. And then you see an object like a vehicle, we train in that. So he would have ran to a car if I just released him from the car.
I see.
And I'm not, the car is no longer, now the driver is the one that we were after because he's the one driving the vehicle.
Yes.
So once we broke the threshold of the car, I unhooked Harlej. And also, we didn't know it at the time that the individual was a murder suspect at Indianapolis. I also didn't know that he was armed with a gun, because I always tell people I will never send my dog to his death. If I know somebody is in a house or in the woods with a gun, there's no point of sending a police canine because you're just literally sending him to a potential death.
That's right.
So he took off running. I gave him commands to stop running. Then I released Harlej, and right away, we usually you hear okay, I give up, or I can call Harlej back, or you start hearing where the dog makes apprehension. And I didn't hear anything, and we still hadn't we couldn't see him anymore. We couldn't hear him. And so at that moment, I was started to like tell the backup officers that I'm with that, hey, I'm going to put him back online, meaning I'm going to hook him back on my leash.
He's out of sight by this time?
He's out of sight. Yes. Okay. Yep. But I know he's still relatively close because I could see like the tall grass moving and things like that, where I knew he was around me, but I didn't know, but he was moving so quick, right?
About how far out, Jarred, would you say you could see grass moving?
Probably like
50 yards?
20, 25. I mean, anything more than that, it was because I couldn't see him. Gotcha. And what saved me, as I'm talking about this, we're working on setting up perimeter at this time and just kind of trying to keep him contained. Yeah. Yes. And what saved me was that community health building had lights on the parking lot. Wow. And I saw Harlej then over by the dumpster. And so my immediate, through my training, was like, he's in the dumpster. And Harlej was circling the dumpster as if he was trying to get inside that area. Okay. So that's when the last time that I really had contact with Harlej. So I make announcements again at the dumpsters for if an individual's inside there, come out or he's going to get bit. And didn't hear anything. After 2 announcements of that, I sent Harlej into the dumpster, and he circled it and immediately came out. So through my training, I'm like, hey, he's not in there. Mm-hmm. But he was at this moment, I could tell that he was an odor of the suspect that we were following.
So he most likely jumped in the dumpster and jumped out, probably?
I think what happened based off the wind, I think he ran by the dumpster. And that wind pooled into that because it was like a brick facade, like to make the dumpster area look nice. Yes. So they had that wall around the actual dumpster.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
So it contained the scent, so it kept Harlej locked in there.
So he smelled that, and then once he went in there, realized he's not in there, right? It's just that odor. So I think what happened where we took off running to the east and he kind of ran southeast.
The suspect
did. Yep. And then once we checked that dumpster area, then all of a sudden I saw Harlej have a head throw, which meaning that we're working in an area and he snaps his head real quick of that odor is kind of intense in that area where he'll show a head throw and quickly snap. Well, I see his body posture change. And if it wasn't for that, I would have put him back on lead, which probably would have been catastrophic for me and for the backup officers. So at that moment, I see him and he takes off running.
You didn't give him a command or deploy him. He just went.
He just went. Yep. And I got saved once again because as we were continuing to work southeast through the woods, I see with the parking lot illuminated, I saw a footprint. And I'm like, Harlej's on him. And when I sent him into the woods, I remember telling my backup officers, hey, this is dangerous. Let him work. And 2 seconds after I said it's dangerous, I heard a single gunshot.
What was it that made you feel? Was it just an intuition?
Yeah.
That something felt wrong?
Well, yeah, it was that feeling that I had. And also at the same time, I knew Harlej was now 100%. I'm like, he's on him now. Right? Seeing the footprint, I'm like, where before I felt like the suspect took off running and we were still trying to locate exactly where he was because we didn't find him right away.
So at the time Harlej goes into the woods, just before you turn to this other officer, how many officers are there with you at that time?
There's me and 2 others.
And so Harlej heads into the woods and you all wait back.
Yep. I told the officers, like, just, hey, wait here. This is dangerous. Because of the fact of he has an advantage. In police work, it's always reactive. You always have to react for what somebody is doing. So
speed of reactivity.
Yes.
Right?
And the other thing too, we had the parking lot. Once again, it was an advantage initially, then became a disadvantage because we were backlit.
Because now you're illuminated and he's not.
Suspect is not. We have no idea where he's at, but now he can see us.
Yes.
And after everything happened, backstepping everything, he was essentially waiting to ambush us.
Oh my goodness! So you say this is dangerous. You hear the gunshot.
Yep.
What flashed through right then? Did you think? I think he got him.
Oh yeah. We had been pretty successful, and Harlej had located a lot of individuals. And he was so driven. Like he would do anything for, right? Like when you train a track at the beginning of their career, you track to a tennis ball. And he obviously the high drive of a mountain wall helps with that. So he'll work for 6 hours if you let him to go try to find that tennis ball at the end of the track, right? And then you become successful and you built so much confidence with the dog knowing, hey, he has found people. He has brought us to a suspect that has ran from us.
Yes.
I know he's successful. So it just built all of that confidence. You know, like my dog is successful and he's right. And you trust your life with the dog, you know? So he took off. I heard the gunshot. And sometimes you get a little bit of hope thinking like, man, maybe it was a warning shot for him. And then I was calling him and he wasn't coming back. And I called him, he wasn't coming back. In that video that Officer Ron Shelnut made, you can hear the radio traffic where the officers are saying they're calling out shots fired. And you can hear me in the background yelling for Harlej. So I'm yelling plots, which is basically come back to the heel position. And he didn't come back. And so as that's going on, I'm like, I think on my body cam, it was kind of like, oh, shoot. Like that sigh of like, I know what happened.
Kind of, it feels inevitable what just transpired.
Yes. But at the same time, like, you know, my concern was I didn't know the extent of it, right? I don't know if he's shot and wounded. I don't know if he's killed, right? Like one shot, you think like, man, he would have shot more. Yeah. Or he shot, you know, and that's the thing too, is like you think, well, maybe he shot and it scared Harlej. But at the same time, I'm like, it wouldn't have scared. Like he was so like, but you start kind of.
Well, because you want to hope.
Yes. Yeah. It's just hope, right? But at the same time, that's what's weird about it all is that you hope for that, but also at the same time, I don't want that because that's not a well-trained police dog if he's running from gunfire.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? So part of me is going, you better not be running away. And the other part is, I hope you are running away.
Yes.
Right?
Man, that mix of emotions, I don't think too many people can identify with that in that because it reminds me of soldiers observing each other. Please don't run, but please be okay.
Yes.
I mean, like your fellow soldier, it just went into the fray.
Yep.
I hope he didn't run, but I hope he's alive.
Yes.
Who goes first? You all are waiting. The gunshot happens. What happens among you guys? Who's prime? Who do you all just start running into the woods? Do you have to be careful because the guy's still armed? Maybe.
Yes.
What happens next?
So I think that what helped with that whole thing is immediately allowed everybody to know that's working that night who we're possibly dealing with. That they're willing to shoot a police dog. Right. We still don't have confirmation that he's dead. But everyone, you could feel it. Everyone's like, that's probably he probably shot Harlej.
Yes.
But we just don't know the extent. We don't know if he's dead. We don't know if he's wounded. So our immediate thing was to get on radio, let everyone know, hey, shots fired. And I start yelling, I don't have my dog. He's he's in the field. And so we called for cover because we had no cover, you know. So we actually the sergeant that pit the vehicle came over with his vehicle and provided us cover and we basically just held the woods.
So you just lined up behind the vehicle?
Yes. Okay. Yep. And then at that point, we got another officer, maybe two other officers that come to our location. But we're holding the woods thinking this guy's he wants us to continue coming to the woods to ambush us. Well, unbeknownst to us, he ended up, after he shot Harlej, he doubled back and ran back toward us, but had gone further south and then went back west. So if you're familiar with Fishers, and he ran into the Saxony neighborhood.
Oh, goodness. With his firearm still.
Correct. Once again, we don't know it, but obviously after all this stuff. So he starts trying to get into homes. So we start getting information over the radio. There's a male attempting to get into homes.
Was this while you're still in the woods you're hearing this?
Yeah. So we're in the parking lot now taking cover behind the car.
Okay.
I'm still calling for Harlej because I still don't know where he's at. And now it's an unknown. Nobody knows kind of but now we start getting information that, hey, there's somebody breaking into homes. Well, we held the woods because we're like, well, what if some off chance that this is unrelated and somebody is trying to get in the house and our suspect is still in the woods?
Waiting for an ambush, basically.
But we quickly find out because of the clothing description that we had from him fleeing from the car, we're like, that's him. He's trying to get... So I held the woods where I was because I wasn't going to leave Harlej. We page out our SWAT team. We start having people, members of our police department show up, detectives, people that fly the drone. And my agency has been unbelievable with us all. And like our chief's there, the mayor comes out, nothing but support from the beginning. State police was there.
At the scene.
Yes.
And this is before you actually went into the woods.
Correct. Okay. Yeah. So our SWAT team shows up. You start getting a state police helicopter came over. And to this day, I still don't remember a helicopter flying over us.
Really?
But we started getting a drone, but the bad thing was that the woods were so thick. We couldn't get any heat signatures. The drone wasn't working because it was so thick. But now people started working on setting a perimeter now over in the Saxony neighborhood because they're like, hey, this is probably our individual that just shot at the dog. Once again, that we still don't know whether he's dead or alive or wounded or whatever. So long story short, we end up shrinking the suspect's world, and he ended up giving up right away.
So, but you were not. So that was a different team of officers. Was it SWAT that took him down?
No, it was state police assisted with that, and then our officers. But Carmel came over, Noblesville came over. We had so many agencies immediately come over and help us, which we're just so grateful for.
So you're holding the woods. This is all going on in the Saxony district. Mm-hmm. Who's the first one to get to Harlej, or was it a team of you that first got to Harlej? Was it multiple officers?
It was. So our SWAT team, we had probably 4 or 5 SWAT members that, right, they get called out and they show up on scene, and they obviously, the more that comes out, they just start trickling in and start formulating a plan. So they had formulated a plan where there were, at that time, like I said, 4 or 5 SWAT members, and actually one of the SWAT members was a canine handler as well. And he went into the woods with his dog, and he came out right away. He's like, I can't even maneuver in there while having a dog on leash because it's so thick. So he went back into the woods. And so one of my fellow canine handlers, who's a sergeant with us, ended up finding Harlej. And
he comes out of the woods to you? Yeah. Does he tell you right away?
Yeah. I could tell right away. Like, time had lapsed now. I mean, like, we're going on 30 plus minutes.
Okay.
And I could see right away as soon as he comes out and he's crying, and he's like, hey, he's dead, you know.
So at that point, do you head into the woods to?
No. So yeah, because my concern from the beginning was, but not the beginning, but once I got confirmation that he was dead, I didn't know what the state of that he would look like. Right. So I didn't want to, I battled with, I didn't want to see him. Yeah. So it was, but you want to see him, but you don't want to see him. And luckily handlers showed up and so we basically, it was a crime scene. So our evidence techs went in there, took pictures of that. And so Harlej got shot on top of his head. They said through the evidence is that he was less than 12 inches away from the suspect. Wow. And so sounds like he was in the air attempting to apprehend the suspect. And the suspect really probably just got a lucky shot, shot him on top of his head, went through his first, second vertebrae and got lodged in the third vertebrae. And so once they took pictures of that crime scene, collected evidence from that, then what we did was I put my police car in line with the woods, and we had parallel lines with police officers, detectives, chief, mayor, chaplains were all out there, and we stood at attention while they brought him out. They wrapped him in a flag.
Right there on the scene they did.
When after they collected all the evidence, then they put him in a flag to give him kind of that respect, and then brought him back out.
And that's the first time you saw him?
That's the first time. Well, and even then, I still didn't. It was his physical body, right? I still didn't know if I wanted to see him, because I didn't know, like, I think I asked maybe what happened, and I think the sergeant said he was shot in the head. So in my, unfortunately with the career that we choose, you see some gruesome things. So my immediate thought was like, I don't want to see this.
Disfiguration of some sort.
Yep. But so yeah, we brought him out, and so I still didn't see him. He was wrapped in the flag.
Completely over his head and everything?
Yes. Okay. His whole body was wrapped in the flag. And that's the other thing too, is like my last memory of him was a strong, fearless dog running in the woods. So I was like, I don't want to have a memory of just awfulness.
Lifeless.
So I remember when they brought him to me, and there was members of the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department, who was another senior handler that I like well respected, was working dogs before I was even in that line of work. And he brought him to me, and I carried him and picked him up and brought him back to my car.
I can't imagine, and especially I think seeing the show of support for him too, the honor to this animal that put his life on the line for everybody there.
Yes, it was. I mean, obviously it's a special bond with a handler, but then it's a special bond with the shift, because you realize, like, man, that could have been one of us. That could have been me. That could have been the backup officers. So we then did a police procession with our vehicles.
Right then.
Yeah. Once we got him in the vehicle, and that's where I start making phone calls to my wife, and someone's now driving to the house to pick her and the kids up, because now this is like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And so we did a procession down to the animal hospital on 96th Street.
Okay.
And
Is that VCA?
VCA.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yep. Very gracious. They allowed us
They're
basically, to have a room where people could say their final goodbyes. Yeah. And that too, that was when I asked my other handlers, I was like, man, because my fear too was like, should I look at him?
Yeah.
Or am I always, and I remember a handler who I trusted was like, he looks good. He looks good. You know what I mean? So, and he did. He just had honestly, it was kind of hard to even tell where the bullet hole went in, and obviously with it getting lodged in, there was no, exit wound.
Yes.
So I remember seeing him, and that's kind of when I just really broke down.
Had the call been made to your wife yet?
Yeah. So my wife and kids were there when we got, so my wife and kids were waiting at the hospital. And so my wife actually was able to, on video, see the procession of, bunch of police cars bringing Harlej to the hospital. Wow. Yeah.
The show of it's hard to find words for that mix of emotions between gratitude, grief, the honor of what's happening and the tragedy of what's happening. It's almost like the brain and heart can't hardly process.
Yeah, it's so quick, right? Like everything is happening so fast, and you still can't, it's almost in shock that you're just you feel like you're just moving, but you don't.
Yes.
Automatic
pilot at that point.
Yeah. And I had one of my best friends on the apartment drove my car, and I was just in the passenger seat, and while we did the procession, and it was just kind of like, you still don't know. You're like, what the heck just happened? You know what I mean? It happened so quick, and at the same time, it takes so long.
So you go home that early in the morning, probably, what did you, 6 a.m. or so? You get home or something like that. And you lay down. Did you sleep at all after that?
Actually, I slept like a rock.
You did?
Yeah. Which,
it's so good that you were able to do that.
And, that's the one thing of kind of mental health is the inability to sleep. Right?
Yes.
And I slept very good. Wow. But I think it was just, I was so exhausted probably as well. But the other thing too, it was such a whirlwind because now we are worried about Harlej with his body, so he's treated just like a police officer. So no police officers don't leave his side. So we had, I think, probably honor guard, probably members of my shift. I don't recall any of that stuff, but I know that people were with him the whole time.
Where was he at this time? At VCA still?
VCA.
Okay,
yep.
So they kept him there.
They kept him there, and then at some point overnight, or the next day, we went to Parkside Animal Hospital. That's where we take our canines, and they're phenomenal. They're fantastic. So they kept him overnight there before we cremated his body. But initially, before we even got to that point, we sent him to Purdue University, and that's where they have to do the autopsy.
Yes, to find out what happened, the trajectory of the bullet. All that stuff.
Yep. And also at the same time, they needed to recover the bullet because that's evidence.
Gotcha.
So what ended up happening to the suspect through Ring door cameras, we know that he went to at least one or two houses with the gun still in his pocket because you could see it. And then at some point, probably when we start shrinking his world, he ditches the gun, and a lab, actually a gun retrieving dog, if you will,
sniffer.
Ended up finding that gun.
Wow.
And that was obviously another piece to our puzzle of needing that for the evidence and for the case. So he
was arrested without incident. He didn't fight or anything.
No. Yep.
He was done.
He was. Yeah. So he gave up pretty quick. Was kind of a cruel guy, I guess, from talking as he was making gunshot noises in the back of the car while we were transporting him.
Goodness.
Yeah. So he obviously didn't have any remorse of what he did. But I don't know if I said it earlier, but yeah, he was 18-year-old. Had been in over 20 shootings in a month and a half.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So that he obviously was just.
It was somebody's time to go.
Yeah.
From his perspective.
Yep. And so he just really didn't care who got hurt or who got injured, and it was just about him.
Goodness.
So once Harlej went to Purdue University, I remember going back on me sleeping. Yes. I remember my dad coming to my house and waking me up and saying, "Hey, they're transporting Harlej. Do you want?" And I was so out of it, and I was like, but I had Sergeant Kyle McFerrin was the one that kind of spearheaded and would keep me up to date on what was happening with Harlej. So he did everything. So he was not getting sleep. I got sleep, but he was going to Purdue, and then he went to just making sure that someone was always with Harlej.
Sounds like your agency takes care of each other.
Oh, yes,
because that is so critical that you be removed from that, recover enough then to keep going with this, because there's a lot more to come.
Yes, there's a lot of the process, but it speaks volumes, kind of like what you're saying. I have so much confidence in my agency and trust that people are going to do the right thing.
That's right.
That probably allowed me to sleep, that I know that people are taking care of it, and that they're going to give Harlej the honor that he deserves.
That's right. So you go home. What's the atmosphere like in your home then? Are your kids emotional? Is your wife emotional? Everyone?
My wife is emotional. I started like neighbors came over that were close with that. And the other thing too that happened was obviously the news started breaking on this.
I was wondering about when that started.
Yeah, but how the news, which I'm grateful for it, but at the same time, what happened was that people started putting out that canine officer killed. So they were
a human was killed.
And so I started getting a lot of friends and family that they were posting my picture on and thought I was killed.
Did they actually post that you were killed?
Well, they were putting canine officer killed, and they were posting Harlej and I's picture.
Oh my!
And it wasn't until like you start hearing more. But even people at my own agency was like
is Koopman okay?
Yeah. Even the call outs, they were thinking like, wait, what? Because they were like, hey, Jarred and Harlej were in the woods. He got shot. So people are like, wait, did Jarred get shot?
Oh my!
Like, is he dead? It was a kind of and then once kind of it was quickly like, people understood like, okay, Harlej was the one that was killed, not Jarred. He kind of, but just the love and support from our agency. And then we started, shortly after, I think at the scene, when we were at the hospital and probably when I was going home, there were 75 police officer agencies that were in that area just to try to find that gun.
Talk about support.
Yes.
75.
Yeah.
Wow. What, speaking to family, how important was it for your family to come together during that time, to bond together and to surround each other?
Yeah.
Your wife, whether it was your wife or the support system at home, how important is that support system at home with something like this?
It's everything. I mean, I think in general to have a support system in life itself, but especially in police work, you can't do what you do and not have support. And so my immediate family, my mom and dad are local, but my wife's amazing, the boys. And so we just had so much support from everyone there. Everyone was just willing to help out in any way that they possibly could. But I contribute, or tribute my recovery process to that, of just the support I had and my wife and talking about it and just days on end of just crying, really. Just sitting there, just not, and then you're going about your day and then you start crying.
And it hits you all of a sudden.
Yep. So the support system is what allowed me to not, I don't say get through it, but to get through that.
To grieve.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people think that grieving is a weakness. Grieving is not a weakness. Grieving is a necessary part of adapting to loss.
Yes.
And if you skip it, there are issues later for you that can well up. And in fact, sometimes I wonder, with even like the suspect that you dealt with, you wonder if these are the guys that steel themselves against grief, against crying because of what's happened to them. And they say, no, I'm going to just be tough. And there's anger and there's violence and there's a ready to do anything to anyone. So you would say that how you processed your grief and how you were able to do that was through the support, not just of your immediate family, but the community and those within your profession and even your extended family as well?
100%. I mean, we started Fisher's automatically is a very, very supportive over us and our agency. And you really saw that after Harlej. The amount, they set up a kind of in the vestibule at our police department, a memorial. And just audit from the beginning, once the word started getting around that a police canine was killed, we started seeing the donations, the food, the flowers, the cards, and like that to me helped me with that process of it all. Just seeing like that Harlej wasn't killed for no reason.
His life mattered.
Yes.
His death mattered.
Yes. Yeah. I can only associate it to like when people experienced 9/11. And that feeling of like us coming together as a nation, and it's like where you experience that and how is in a tragedy like 9/11, but at the same time, the love and support that, you felt
Yes.
just walking around. And so I always said, like, I felt like that love and support. Like, it felt like I was attending my own funeral in a way of seeing, so it's tragic what happened. But as a handler, like I was, the mix of sadness of the loss was also so proud of like the work we put in with Harlej, and that allowed him to get to that point was like, you did exactly what you were supposed, and you were trained. And to this day, he would go back in there again, right? Yeah. Like, it's just...
He died with honor.
Yeah.
He died with honor.
And it brought light to police canines to show you, like, these dogs... Like, that's the unfortunate thing. In the state of Indiana, they aren't seen as police officers.
Oh, I see. In Indianapolis, you mean?
In Indiana.
Oh, Indiana, period.
State of Indiana.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's why the suspect wasn't charged with that, because I noticed in his charges there was no charge for, like, basically slaying an officer. It was called, abuse of an animal, or there's some other code?
It's a level 6 felony.
Level 6. Okay.
And that's, I've had the privilege of speaking at the State House to try to get the law changed. Representative Jeter is one that kind of tried to brought that to light to the State House, and he tried to get that law changed because theoretically, if the suspect would have stolen Harlej, picked him up and taken him, that's a higher crime than him killing him.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it's been an uphill battle trying to, and like I said, but bringing that to light, Representative McNamara was one of the first representatives that she actually got, and I'll be honest, I didn't even know this was a law. She got that law changed where a medical service like ambulance is able to transport a working dog. Before then, I guess it wasn't a law, but now they can transport a service animal that's injured in the line of duty.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so thank you to both those representatives that brought that to light. But so they still have not changed the law, and it shows you more than anything. One of the big debates with it all is like, where do you draw the line of the sand? And if you raise that crime of killing a police canine, then what about all these other ones? And so my argument to that is our problem is that we are seeing them still as an animal and not as we don't see them in the light of as a police officer.
I see.
Right? We're trying to well, how do we change this law to make it where it's a police officer? Well, the fact that you're debating that shows you that you still see it as an animal.
Yes, I see what you're saying.
Yes, instead of as a
almost
police
as a pet.
Yes,
instead of this is a agency tool, but more than a tool, it's an actual officer because it can actually do interdiction. I mean, it can do all kinds of things that an officer does.
Yes,
it's doing the same duties.
Yes,
yeah,
yep.
Not exactly the same, but
but we're putting on these animals to go into
apprehension.
And to help save a life. I always say in our policy, it shows that as well, is if there is an immediate danger to the police officer, other police officers, and the community, then you can utilize a police canine with a violent misdemeanor or felony. And so it's such a tool that we have at our disposal that at the end of the day, it's not a lethal option, right? It's not a lethal force. Like it's versus shooting somebody, to know that you could send a dog in to make sure that people are safe and protected. Yeah, it speaks volumes for what the dogs are and what we ask of the dogs when we're on the road.
That's right. We talked about this earlier. I'm sure have you lost family, friends to death like humans? I mean, in your life. So if I can have you imagine the person that was closest to you that you've lost, and then the loss of Harlej, is it a different type of grief? Is it its own thing that nothing is really like? And how would you describe that? I think it goes back to like what we said earlier of when you see it as like a backup officer, like it's like that dog is willing to, if you put it in the form of that dog is willing to die for you. Yes. And to have somebody, they always say it as somebody to lay down their life for another man, right? Like, that's right. The Bible says literally, yes. And literally to go in and that dog would do anything to make sure I go home is just absolutely amazing. So it's just a different, when you feel like a human being is like, maybe they're going through an illness or something. So maybe you find comfort in the fact that maybe like, hey, now they don't have to suffer. Yes. But when it's a working dog and they're healthy and strong and they're essentially laying down their life. Yes. So you or other officers or people in the community are safe when they're sleeping. Yes. Or when they're at work and it's just a different level of like honor. I feel like when someone's willing to I'll do whatever I need to make sure people are safe. Yes. No, that makes sense. And if you think about it, all of us as human beings, whether we're police officers or not, have self-protection built into us. But those animals, it's not about protecting themselves. It's about everybody else.
Yes.
And they don't think about themselves.
Correct.
They'll put themselves right in the lion's mouth to keep everybody else okay. And that does make them unique.
Yes.
Because we have that little hesitation says, I need to go home. They're not thinking about going home. They're making sure everybody else goes home.
Yes. And it goes back to, too, that's where, like, you know, you'll get a lot of flack of people that are like, I can't believe you would do that to a dog. But at the same time, it's like we give these dogs, this is what they love it. They're created to do, right? And so for me, I always say, like, I am the brains of this operation, and I have to put my police canine in the best situation to be successful.
Yes.
That's why I'm not sending him to his death. If I knew that individual had a gun, I'm not sending him into the woods. I'm not sending him to a house where there's somebody that's potentially armed, right? Like I have to be the brains for this, but I know when I do send him that he is going to be successful in what we do, right? And I have equipped him with everything possible to be successful, and we've put hours and hours of countless work in so he can be successful and do it in the safest manner that we possibly could. Because my goal as a handler is that I go home, my dog goes home, and every police officer that's with me on a deployment goes home, and that the community is safe.
Yes.
Just because of one individual that decides to do something that harm other people or put himself at whatever, that's not my fault.
Right.
He chose to do this, or she chose to do this, and now I'm just put in a situation to try to help everybody so we can try to be as safe as possible.
100%. And you said something interesting about investment of time. I imagine, too, there'd be an element of the grief that could almost feel like that of losing a child because of the investment.
Yes.
You invest in your children, you raise them, you train them, and even though it's not equivalent to the love you have for your child, the investment in the life of this animal and what they become to you, to lose that is to lose something that has tentacles that reach into so much of your life and your brain and your heart that it's hard to probably process all of that. What helped you come to peace and closure? I think you've mentioned already probably support, the widespread support. Anything else for you? Were there certain things that were said? Were there certain people? Were there certain events that really helped a lot? You said, wow, that was markedly helpful, or was it just a kind of a slow process of the whole thing?
I think it was a process of everything, but I think like things that like really come to mind is like officers like 4 years later telling me thank you. You know, if it wasn't for you, I don't know. You know, I would have went in the woods if it wasn't for you. You know, people becoming dads for the first time. That, you know, can you imagine if they were the ones that got killed and then now they're you know, like, so for me it's a horrible and I've lost personal pets, but it's still, when you have a love and passion for dogs, and especially for me, for working dogs, there's more in the tank. There's more, like this tragedy, this sadness doesn't just stop here. I have to keep going with my life, and my passion is working dogs. And if I can help somebody else, or, you know, like I love police canines because that's the one thing to me in law enforcement with our kind of our society where it's pro law enforcement or you're not pro, right? It's like the dogs bridge the gap beautifully with the community because everybody can associate with their own pet. Right. And it's like when Harlej was killed, it's people are, how dare you kill a dog?
Yes.
Right? When a police officer gets killed, our immediate thing is, well, what happened?
That's true. You're right.
You know, like it's crazy to me. And it's just, and we do so many, like I said, so many social engagements and the letters that I got from kids that were like, hey, you played basketball and I got to see Harlej. You know, it's like that stuff speaks volumes for like the engage, or you never know the impact you have on somebody else because your willingness to, I mean, you don't get to see a lot of police canines anyways.
No.
So when you put yourself out there and allow people to see a dog and what they're capable of doing and that level of respect that you're just, I just love the whole thing of bridging the gap with the community within law enforcement. So it was multiple things that happened and what people said to me, but still that burning desire to me have been like, I still want to keep going. I still want to impact in a certain way. And
that's so critical. And we're going to, I want to talk about that. But just before that memorial service was really something, wasn't it for Harlej?
Incredible.
How, I mean, so describe a little of what visually it looked like and then what was going on in you during just seeing this for him.
I think you go through something like that. Obviously, everything's an unknown. I've been a part of police funerals, sadly. And I've been a part of when the canine handler for Boone County, Officer Pickett, was killed. And I remember us doing a procession. I was part of that procession with our police canines. And that was one thing that the family wanted, was to do a procession with just the police canines. And it was it was very cool to be a part of and witness. And then I would have thought that I would, and we did a procession with Harlej. And it just touches home with all that stuff. But, I did there was so many people that donated money to our agency to try to hey, whether Officer Koopman wants to have another dog or not, we want to help in any way possible. So my family and I, we really took a part of ourselves to be a part of a lot of the community stuff, which it was exhausting, right? Like after you look back, you're exhausted. But at the same time, I have no regret. That was the only way that I could possibly thank people for donating their money and donating their time or whatever it was to just simply say sorry for your loss.
And they probably needed it to process their own grief at what had happened. I imagine people in the community were real tore up about this.
Yeah. And I think about specifically Dispatch, who is the one that's in the background of it all. And I remember talking with dispatchers that said hey, seeing you go through the process and you kind of be okay with it has helped us with our process of it all. So awesome. Once again, it goes back to you never realize the impact that you have. And like I said, for me, it was it's about talking about what happened on a continual basis.
Yes.
And you could tell now I still get emotional with it.
It's good. That's a good sign.
Yeah. And, but it's all encompassing of everything and the love and support that I have. And just but I think, I contribute me believing that there's something higher than myself, and knowing that people are just so willing to just help.
Yes.
And it's goes back to the 9/11 effect of it doesn't matter race, gender, anything. No. They just want to help people and feel love. And love, if you can just spread that, it's just amazing how far that reaches.
It really is amazing. I know I told my wife on my Facebook page, I have over 7,000 followers, and you should see the range of people that love my page that would never talk to each other, some of them. Yes. You see the icons, what they are for or against, but dogs unite people.
Yes.
When it comes to a dog, we're in.
Yes.
Hey, you work with dogs, they don't care political, they don't care religious. If you're a dog person, right, it's amazing. So hearing that, that's such an insightful thing. No one cares anymore.
Right.
No one cares what affiliate. It's about the dog.
Yep.
And it really
I always say that I'm the limo driver for my dog. That's all I am.
And he loves it.
Yeah, that's right.
So this Harlej was shot in November 2019, and then Rico, your current buddy, who I got to meet, keyed up, cool dude. January, right, is when he came into the picture of 2020. So just a couple months later.
Yeah.
Was that difficult to start so soon with another dog? Did you have mixed emotions during it?
When it happened, I remember once again the support. I remember chief and assistant chief all came to the house and was like, "Hey, is there anything we could do for you? If you want to, you have our full support of getting another canine." And obviously, it took some time, away, but it seemed like a short time, but it seemed like a long time. So when you're used to working a dog every day and caring for a dog and feeding it and walking the dog, when you go, 2 months without a dog, you're like, I don't know what, it's a part of you is I don't know what,
part of your purpose goes away and a sense of that, even though it's not.
Yeah. So it felt like the right, and like I said, going back, my passion was still, I still feel like I have more to give in police canine and working dogs. So it was I probably made the decision a couple weeks after, was in talking with other handlers and just the support I had of people being grateful of kind of how, the overall scene was handled and stuff. Yes. And I was I deserve it to myself and other people to get, and to prove to myself, hey, I can do this.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Right. And this isn't just because this happened, this doesn't define,
No.
And I think I think it helped so much that Harlej didn't suffer.
Yes.
And I think some of that probably maybe the process would have been harder for me. But knowing who it was, knowing how dangerous he was, knowing probably the impact that we had by apprehending somebody like that. So that just helped me kind of get back on that saddle. So when I went back in January of 2020, I was really excited, but then like you had said, it opens up a whole nother thing of emotions that you never knew you had. right? Like in that process, I remember calling handlers and crying and being like, I would never have to be in the situation if somebody didn't kill Harlej, right? So you meet, and then you start thinking, so then, like I said, when Harlej and I both went through together, we were both brand new. I had no expectations, right? I was forming expectations as I went along. And now going through with Rico, now I'm a senior.
And you're a trainer at this point too?
Yeah, so I went through, the second time I went through as a trainer. But now I have an expectation of how good Harlej was. I have an expectation and you forget the beginning forms of those trainings, of all the work you put in, right? It's easy to forget the work.
Yes.
And so when I was going through with Rico, who's no fault to his own, is only a 13-month-old puppy who knows nothing. And I'm like, why don't you do this? Why don't you do, right?
Yes.
Harlej would, so
right. Comparison.
Yes. It's easily to compare. And you take for granted it reminded me how much work I put in with Harlej.
Did you so at what point did you become conscious you were doing that?
Right away.
Oh, so you could tell that you were comparing to Harlej. Did you self-check with that, or did you just disregard it for a while? Did you at some point did you say I can't be doing this to this dog, or did it actually work to push him where he needed to go?
It made me be more patient.
Interesting. That's awesome.
Because I always say, at the square root of it all, I always say we as handlers have to form to them. They don't form to us. I have, like, Rico's his own personality versus Harlej.
Yeah,
they were completely two different dogs. Yeah. And instead of me trying to make Rico into Harlej, I had to be fine with Rico being Rico.
Yes.
I
think that's the hardest thing. Clients of mine that lose dogs, it's like they get this other one and they say, our other dog our other dog never had an issue with our other dog. But this is this one.
Yes.
And you have to honor this one as this one.
Yes.
He's his own person, not person, but he's his own creature.
Yeah. And they bring their own, like Rico is an amazing dog. And he brings so many things that Harlej didn't have, right? Like that I appreciate about Rico that Harlej didn't have. So there's so many things that like it was that me taking that step back of being like, allow Rico to be Rico.
Yes.
And work Rico.
How was that a process as well, or did you find that happen very quickly?
No, it was a process. And
it was.
And for Harlej, I felt like, once again, it's knowing what I don't know, right? I don't know. I'm brand new to working a dog when I had Harlej, where I have an expectation now of a dog should be this. And so with Rico, it felt like it took longer for him he was actually a very intelligent dog. And that's probably why I was drawn to him. He was catching on to things very quickly. But there were some aspects, like I love the patrol side of working a police dog, of tracking or area searching and attempting to find somebody that flees. That's my passion. And so with Rico took longer to kind of come around to that. So
what did he want to do instead?
It was just the young puppy in him.
Distractible and
but I think it was finding, once again, it's what worked for Harlej didn't work for Rico. So it made me become an even better handler because I had to problem solve myself and say, okay, if I can let Rico be Rico, what does he need to be successful versus Harlej was successful that way, but Rico's not the same way.
There's no template for
Correct.
You do one temperament, now you have another temperament. That I can see what you're saying, where it would broaden your ability and your tool bag.
Yes.
So that if you had a third dog eventually, now you have all the experience of two different dogs. Now let's analyze this one and see what we got.
Yes.
Instead of just saying, hey, you need to conform.
Right.
Yeah. That's really awesome. And Rico's a cool dog. I met him. I didn't pet him a whole lot, but boy, he's ready. He's ready to do whatever you tell him. That's for sure. For you. You, not me. You.
Yes.
You, Jarred, you said something to me. This was a couple of days ago. You said, so much good came from the tragedy, the evil of this. Just top of the dome, what are two or three things you could say right away, like these good things came from this that I wouldn't have expected? I
think bringing light to police canines and what they do on a daily basis that people take for granted. The amount of the people I've met. You know, I've met some amazing people, you included. I've been never sitting on a podcast or being on the news doing a thing about. I've got to speak at the state house to try to change laws. Awesome. And I always say, like, if I could help another handler, then guess what, Harlej, like, he didn't just die.
That's right.
Right, like he's grown. Like I'll meet people from all over the country and they're like, hey, weren't you the handler? I've met suspects that we were taking to jail that's like, hey man, I'm sorry about your dog. And you're like, really? And they're like, I'm sorry about your loss. Like, so it's amazing, like kind of like the web that started with all of that. And I would just say the appreciation of what we do, the unknown, right? Like it's like when a police officer dies, it kind of makes everybody on edge in the police world because it makes you realize like, hey, you never know what
your number could be up next.
Yes. Yeah. So when you come into contact with that and you experience something like that, I think it brings forth the light of like how important training is.
Yes.
And just so those would probably be the main three things that I would say right off the top of the head that I would say.
Well, that makes sense. Final question here. I appreciate you giving so much time. This has been an awesome conversation. I know it's not the same thing when people lose their pet, but quite a few of my clients that have lost their first pet, it's insightful as you've talked today. Two things I see. One is they feel like if I get another dog, I'm doing a disservice to the memory of my first dog. Right. And some that I see that have gotten a second dog think I would need to just love him for him, but he's not like our other dog. And there's this comparison thing that they know they shouldn't be doing, but they feel stuck in it.
Yep.
What would you say to dog parents who have lost a dog and they're grieving and they're not sure if they should get another one? They're not sure if that does a disservice. I know for you, it's a drive I have a dog that actually works in the community. What about those whose dog really still is working at home to protect the home?
Right.
What would you say to them? What is okay for them to grieve? When is it time to move on? What's just your advice? I know wouldn't tell people.
Yeah.
What's your advice?
I think, everyone's grieving process is different. But I think you cherish the time and work and energy you had with your dog. And I think you understand that you're upset and sad because you do care, right?
Yes.
And the dog made a lasting impact on your life.
That's right.
But at the same time, when you get another dog, kind of like what I failed myself in of allowing that next dog to be that dog and allowing that personality to be the new thing that you love about that dog, right? This dog will, like Rico will never replace Harlej. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, Rico is a very special dog. Yeah. And he, it's not his fault. He's a 13-month-old puppy that he wants to go work now. Right. And so I feel like I owe it to myself or another individual that gets another dog. You owe it to the next dog to show them love.
Yep.
And so I think some of that stuff is so key to not necessarily compare because that dog will never be like the dog you had.
That's right.
But that dog, the next dog is special and is going to love you in a different way. And it makes you grow as a human being.
That's right.
In a different way that it forces you outside your box, right? Like with me with the training, it forced me to be a better person and a better canine handler. Yes. Because I had to, what makes, and then once I stopped comparing Rico or why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Harlej is once I allowed Rico to be Rico and I took a step back, then that love and excitement that I had for Rico.
Yes.
It was like, now this is fun to try to mold Rico now.
Right. So that element of another dog needs my leadership and I need the personal growth.
Yes. Yep. 100%.
Should motivate. Yes. Say, Jarred, thank you so much, Officer Koopman.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate it. And thanks to Fishers Police Department for the agency giving you this time.
Yes.
Thank you guys for that, whoever is responsible for that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining me today on the Canine Lowe-Down. It's been an honor to have you with me today. My thanks to Fishers Canine Officer Jarred Koopman for coming on the podcast today and sharing his story. If you have questions or comments or would like to book a dog training consultation with me, you can do so by visiting my website, IndieDogWhisperer.com. Thanks for listening to the Canine Lowe-Down. Join me next time when, once again, I'll help you get wise to the whys behind your dog's behavior. I'm Nathan Lowe, the Indie Dog Whisperer. See you soon.
This is the Canine Lowe-Down with the Indie Dog Whisperer, Nathan Lowe. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast. And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Online now at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.